Good morning. Dr. Gary on the road. We sell dental practices nationwide. We're dental practice brokers. So anyway, today's topic is going to be 3 buyers, 3 negotiations, 3 levels of risk assessment, 1 winner. That's our title. Let's get into that. But before we do, let's talk about our company. So we've now been doing the dental practice brokerage for 12 years. I was a dentist for 25. We have 10 employees, 12 years, and we're in 26 states now selling different dental practices. We're excited. We have 2 CPA accountants, marketing director, operations director, 5 development acquisition specialists. And it's exciting. So you can reach us from 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. virtually every single day, East Coast time. Just reach out. We're here for you. We'll work every day, 363 days a year. We take off Christmas and Easter. That's it. We're ready for you at any time. So if you just need advice, feel free to call us. The information you're about to hear is strictly for entertainment purposes. It's not legal or business advice. Our phone number is 201-663-0935. The website is dentalpracticeguide.com. So anyway, let's talk about what this situation is with 3 buyers, 1 practice, 3 different negotiations, 3 levels of risk assessment on behalf of the buyers, and 1 winner. So you have a practice in a building, in the $1 million range, package deal. So the first buyer gave a very good offer, and we were proceeding forward after letter of intent. Again, letter of intent is always non-binding. You're not bound by that, but at least gives an intention. But historically, once you give the letter of intent, you kind of stick with the guidelines of that, historically, even though it's non-binding. So the buyer is excited, seller is excited. We're moving forward. It's a pre-approved buyer, experienced buyer. And we negotiated, came to a fair dollar amount. Everybody was happy. And then it came to terms, contracts. A lot of moving parts in a contract. You're going to be dealing with work in progress. How do you finish the work you've started before the closing? Access to records. Restrictive covenants. Post-closing employment percentages that you're going to pay the seller to work for you if the seller's staying on. And also, many sellers are somewhat concerned about their staff, and they would like some kind of assurance the staff is going to stay on, that the buyer will keep them on. Historically, buyers always keep them on, at least initially, which is a great idea. You don't ever want to let go of the staff, not right away, because that's your link to the past. So the sellers, feel comfortable. So you got a lot of moving parts. And the other contractual issue is the allocation of purchase price. How much for goodwill? How much for restrictive covenant? How much for leasehold improvements? These are negotiable numbers. So those are contractual issues. When you deal with a contract, you put everything together and you analyze it and you negotiate everything at once because of all these moving parts. First buyer, acceptable on price, could not agree on contractual terms. There were certain issues in the contract that the buyer was not comfortable with. And those issues were enough to drive the buyer away. Now, the seller had agreed to, I would call it usual and customary, contractual negotiations. So all of those things I just discussed, the seller accepted what was normal and customary. The general attorney would look at it and say, here's the terms of the contract, is within normal limits. It was a fair negotiation. But there was certain contractual issues on the buyer's behalf would not budge on. That's it. The buyer's risk assessment of those terms, it was just 1 or 2 terms, the buyer wouldn't budge. He said, that's it. You don't agree to this, I will not proceed forward. So what you have is a risk assessment on this one buyer that had so much value they put on this risk of this 1 or 2 terms. In contractual terms, they walked away. And I'm saying to the buyer, well, wait a minute, how much you're putting so much value on that contractual terms that, you're equating it to so much money that you possibly may lose that you're just walking away. And they said, yes, I am. So we tried to negotiate, tried to talk, we couldn't come to terms. Buyer walked away. Now, I think the buyer made a huge mistake because the practice is going to grow. This was a practice that was, the fair amount of referrals were going out of the office, okay? You keep them in the office, that's going to turn into a lot of income. Secondly, no marketing. The seller was not marketing the office. So you increase marketing, you're talking about, could be 10% increase in a year at least. By sending out by keeping all the referrals out, that's $1 million package, building and practice. By keeping the referrals in-house, another 15% income increase. You're talking 25% the first year is feasible, is my opinion. So the buyer, even though that 25% was potential, I said the loss you're going to incur of lost income because you are so hung up on contractual terms. And again, the seller agreed to terms which could be considered under most circumstances usual and customary, acceptable terms. Buyer said no. They valued the risk so high, they were willing to give up my opinion of a 25% increase the first year. But that's it. They didn't do it. They walked away. Second buyer comes in. This buyer, it was on price. The issue was price. The buyer was not comfortable with the price. So in the end, going back and forth, the buyer placed so much emphasis on what their living expenses were to try to fit the practice generation of income. So their living expenses they weren't comfortable. But we said, well, why don't you keep your other job for a little while, keep it part-time, and you can work something out. They said, no. Has to have a 1-for-1. I have to have enough money coming out of this practice that has to support my lifestyle. And we went back and forth. Now, we're only 7% apart. 8%, somewhere on there, on price. The seller came down, but seller wasn't going to go down another 7 or 8%, and the buyer wouldn't go up. So you have a 7-8% difference. They're not budging on it. Risk assessment on the buyer's end. The buyer, I told the buyer, you're probably going to do 25%, in my opinion, better the first year. Buyer didn't want to hear about it. Buyer said the practice won't fulfill my needs. But then wait a minute, I said, what about the tax write-offs? What about the independence? What about you own the building, the write-offs on the building, the income? We showed the buyer, you're actually going to make more money than you're making now. But wouldn't bite, just wouldn't bite. And I think the reason for it, and understandable, I was in that position too 25, 30 years ago. It's your first big purchase. You're nervous. What the buyer did, the buyer defaulted to the position of safety. And that safety was keeping their old job. His, hers, whatever it was. Keeping their old job. They thought, well, if I keep my old job, I continue to get money. Of course, he could lose the job, pandemic, he can get sick, disability. I mean, losing all the tax benefits, not building his future, her future. And why are you doing that? you're not building a future. You're that many years away from growth and building your practice. Doesn't want to hear about it. Risk assessment. Their risk assessment was, forget it. I'm going to fall to the safety of my present job. Just, I guess he assumes, or she assumes, it's going to last forever. So risk assessment, walked away. Now the next one. Finally, the last one was the buyer that purchased. That buyer looked at all the various, the contract, the terms, the price, and the previous buyer, as I say, was about 7% behind, 7-8%. This buyer made up the difference. Said, well, I'm buying a business. I'll make the money back that I'm overspending, that I'm not as comfortable with. There was a slight negotiation on the seller, a little bit more, but I'll do it. So they just analyzed everything, analyzed the terms of the contract, analyzed the price, and said, I'm going for it. I'll make up the difference in a shorter period of time. My risk assessment is it's worth moving forward. So, yes, the third buyer, she had a little experience before, and they just put it beyond them. So that's what buyers go through. That's the thought process of buyers. So here you have one buyer, 3 buyers, 1 winner, 3 negotiations, 3 levels of risk, and the one buyer is going to win. They made up that 7% difference that the other one couldn't bite. And they got over the terms of the contract, what the other one refused. And I think they're going to be extremely successful. I believe the other 2 buyers are going to realize after the third buyer buys it and the deal's over that they should have moved forward. Their risk assessment was just too tight. And I think they made an error because of that. So that's where we are. All right. Well, we're signing off. Remember, if you are thinking about selling to a DSO, we work with them. We have several we work with. We're independent from them. They'll pay our commission. And on occasion, based on certain criteria, we can get your legal fees reimbursed at closing. So please give us a call on this. Let's move forward. Let's get a deal together. We're here for you. Call us. If you just want to call the chat and you have some basic questions, we can do that. Remember, sellers, we can give you an evaluation of your practice. Just give us a ring and away we go. All right, I'm off to swim. It's going to be a great day, and summertime is around the corner.